Hello, colleagues from Regulation and Governance. My name is Luis Mejía. I am academic counselor at the Hertie School in Berlin, and together with my colleague Alejandra Elizondo from CIDE in Mexico, we have recently published an article in this journal, and we would like to tell you a bit about the most important aspects of the paper, hoping that for some of you will be interested to explore and further engage with our findings. So basically what we try to do is to give some thoughts and explanations and present some empirical evidence on how regulatory policy choice in post-reform developing context actually is shaped. And for this, we ask ourselves, how do the systemic features of a developing country shape regulatory policy choices of an agency that regulates a specific aspect of society? So in this case, departing from a very important initiative that started in Mexico almost 10 years ago to reform the oil and gas industry, which was nationalized, which was very heavily relying on the state, and suddenly in 2013 open to the market system. So the question is how an agency that is commanded to do this suddenly deal with the regulation of such a Herculean task to supervise one of the biggest oil markets in the world, as in Mexico is. So we analyzed the case of the Industrial Safety Regulation Agency. It's called ASEA. In Spanish slang. And for this, we actually studied the case of this agency, which was created at the same time when the reform of the oil and gas industry was issued, where the markets were liberalized and open to the market competition. And as I say, the context of this agency, that has a Herculean task to supervise all the environmental and safety hazard matters for the whole industry, from petrol stations to the big oil and exploration on overseas. So it was a very, very big task. We just know in the paper we explained that we just know of 2 or 3 other agencies in the world that do it, but not with the size and the challenge of a new one. Derived from the Mexico's 2013 energy reform. So we use an analytical framework to answer the question of how the systemic features of the Mexican situation or the context shape the decision of the regulation to be the outcome that it has. And we explain it through 2 frameworks. One of the high hazard regulation framework that has developed to understand how and when high hazard plays a role to decide for certain type of regulatory tools depending on the matter of context of hazard, and the conditions for effective regulatory design, right? What are the efficiency mechanisms or the different varieties of tools already existing there in the literature, or the debate when it's better to use each of other aspects and theoretically choose this framework to tell us ourselves what could be a feasible explanation of why the agency came up with certain type of outputs to regulate this, the industry in Mexico. Our research design, very quickly, we conducted a qualitative content analysis of a corpus of 24 core regulatory oversight instruments proposed by the agency as an initial stage to deal with the mandate of regulating the industry. And within the corpus, we coded and classified more than 1,000 units of observation, which is basically going command after command, article of article that regulates the industry, and try to classify it in terms of the type of tool that it represents. We did a theoretical classification of this. Of course, there you will find in the paper some intercode reliability checks for you to know how we did it, how we proceed. All the data is available. So our analysis is based on the literature, as I mentioned before. We depart from the paper of Coglanese and Latzer in 2003, where they put a draft or a model to understand when and how the cost of monitoring an industry would be less or more, and what would be the regulator should engage in terms of deploying more stringent tools or deploying more hands-off tools to to deal with them overseeing such an industry. And we understood that the trade-off is based on the agency's capacities to oversee the industry, right? The capacities that the agency would have to monitor the industry in the whole value chain, and also the level of homogeneity of the technology that the industry has itself to monitor itself, right? The systems of security that the industry has, and due to the fact that the regulator is analyzing a whole big scope of sectors in the value chain, it would be different type of technology which doesn't allow the agency to make it happen properly. So it's explained in the paper. It's explained what are the consequences of this, and we just find that the market disparities in resources, what I mentioned in the industry, are definitely to create more systems oriented to delegate the capacities of supervising to the industry, but also the fact that it's a very little agency starting with very low capacities shape the fact that you have to create a monitor-based system in which industry self-regulates. So the contribution is basically to strengthen the empirical understanding of the challenges faced by these agencies, not only for the case of Mexico. We try to give an explanation of why some other countries might be facing this type of challenges, vis-a-vis what could happen in developed contexts or in the global north. So please, I invite you to read the paper. If you have further questions, you can actually write to us, and I'm very happy to engage in more discussions like this. Thank you.